Welcome everybody. Get comfy. 2 days in a row, Peggy.
I know we did that yesterday too.
We got to take a break. We got to take a break. We're showing our showing the amount of volume we're doing this September here.
Yeah, so welcome to our webinar. We will give you guys everybody a couple minutes to roll in because we have a lot of registrants. We want everybody to get in here, get settled. A couple things that we always get asked, are we going to get a recording? Yes, you are. We will send you a recording. Sometimes our marketing team can make it same day because people are so excited and writing it and asking for it. We'll do our best, but you will definitely get the recording. So if you want to listen again, you want your partner to listen, your child, whatever, or you have to dip out for a minute or two because you're at work and you need to talk to somebody, whatever it is. So rest assured. Also, we love questions, and we got 3 people here that can bang out a lot of answers over the next hour. So please put them in the Q&A versus the chat. And we'll remind you if you forget, you can be anonymous, which is really nice in there if you want to be anonymous on your question. But now that I've said don't use the chat, if you could put in the chat, because we love to see, one, what classes do you have kids? Not just the one that maybe you're on now, but the younger ones, and then where you are in the country, because we're pretty close to almost getting all 50 states. So
be 9. Just need Wyoming. Let's go, Wyoming.
Actually, though, I was thinking, Carp, I don't know if we've had Alaska. We've had Hawaii, but have we had Alaska?
I'm told from my people we have had Alaska.
We have. All right. Well, then there's another one from Turkey. Wow.
Turkey.
We had one in Turkey yesterday too. That's awesome.
And we're fairly well represented here geographically ourselves. I'm up here in the Northeast, just north of Boston. We got JP on the other end down there in Southern California, and Peggy's up here, Pacific Northwest, out there in Seattle. So, and looks like we got about everybody in between. Another Hawaii, Peggy, getting up with us out there. Wow. There we go. Love it. Okay. So obviously lots to cover here. Everybody, I'll reiterate what Peg said. Please make this interactive. This is your opportunity to ask the questions that are keeping you up at night, right? Obviously, we're here to talk about financial aid, scholarships, and then focus. And we're actually going to start on the essay piece because we're hearing this everywhere, and JP is going to hammer this. This is arguably the most important year ever for the essay, specifically for a whole host of reasons. But that is something that we've really heard, and I think are learning in real time across the board. So it's good that you guys are paying attention to that, right, as well as the financial piece of the puzzle, and you'll see how they're related, even though it may not seem too obvious. So it doesn't matter what your questions are, FAFSA questions, whatever, put them in the Q&A. You got a great opportunity to have those answered. So without further ado, we're College Aid Pro, right? I'm one of the founders. My name is Matt Carpenter. I've been doing this for approaching 20 years here, which is pretty amazing. And it's really all I've ever known professionally is just working with families and trying to guide them through this process. And really my sweet spot has really always been in the financial piece of that, right? How do we maximize our opportunity for financial aid? How do we maximize our opportunities for scholarships? How can we make this thing work, right? In its simplest terms, let's graduate as a student with great opportunities and not start my life behind the 8 ball in terms of debt. And let's have parents be able to retire someday, right? Because they didn't overspend on college. In its simplest terms, that's what we're trying to do. And obviously there's a whole bunch that goes into that. And I think your starting point is right here, right? Is just being engaged, getting educated, and making sure that you understand what your family should be doing, what mistakes you should be avoiding. And you're in great company, right? I have, I have admired each of these folks from afar for some time, right? Peggy, finally, I wore her out a couple of years ago. I said, you have to be on my team, right? The fairy godmother of financial aid, I have to have you on. We have to do this together, right? And she's somebody that I think is her biggest credentials. Number one, professionally, she built a great business in the Seattle area and really across the country. But she's also been through it. She's lived it and breathed it with her twins that she put through college, so she can really understand where you all are sitting right now. And then JP is somebody that, has I think is really unique for a couple of reasons. Number one, he was the former director of financial aid at USC. So he spent had a great career kind of on that side of the fence, learning all the intricacies of what the colleges are seeing, what conversations they're having, how they're interpreting things, used all that knowledge and experience, and then started his own business and got on the private side of the fence, right? And with that also, I consider to be a little bit of a unicorn, because for most of us, like Peg and I are in this space where we're either financial aid experts or we're admissions experts. And it's very rare that it's both, right? And JP is one of those rarities. So all that is to say that you're in great hands, but Peggy, if you want to say hi quick, and then JP can introduce himself and we'll dive in.
Yeah, I mean, Carp shared a lot of the stuff that I would share. My background is in the finance industry, financial advisor, financial planner. And then much like a lot of you here, when my twins hit high school, I was just shocked at how complicated, not saving, because that had been a thing I worked on for years, but like just all of it, how it works, right? How financial aid works, but then more importantly, where you fit. And at the end of this webinar, on the financial part, we're going to talk about, you will understand much better. So the more knowledge you have on the financial side as a parent, if you're an informed consumer, you are better able to buy, and you are all buying the next chapter for your kids, right? You're investing in your kids for the next chapter. So the more you know, the better. And that's what we're here to do, is to educate you on that. So I'm happy to be here. So JP, why don't you take it away?
Hey everyone, and yeah, Matt already kind of said everything about me. Claim to fame, if you will, as former director of financial aid. I spent many years there. It was probably some of the most rewarding years of my time, but I definitely over time realized if I wanted to make a bigger impact and really help more families, it was time to transition and go more to private practice and maybe share stuff that I wasn't allowed to say when I was a director of financial aid, and really give some meaningful help. And just for all the time I worked alongside admissions and traveled with admissions and would sit on planes and trains with admissions going over applications, I really got an insight of what they look for and what's important to them. And then as they've moved on to different schools, we still stay connected. And as their schools have a different maybe personality to them and what they're looking for there, I just it's a great network to be part of. So I find it to be a really good way to help families in a meaningful way.
All right. I love it when we get questions while we're doing intros. That means we're going to have a fun crowd. I love it. I love it. So keep them coming, everybody.
Good.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here and we are going to get started. I was just looking at this. Hold on, guys. Make sure I have this. Okay, here. All right, here we go. All right. As Matt said, we are College Aid Pro, and this is truly our mission to end the student debt crisis by empowering you to shop smarter for college. And as I said before, the more you know, the better you can shop. So that's what we're here for today. So there we all are. And the next thing here, all of you should have received an email this morning that encouraged you to set up a free account. Matt's going to put the link in the chat. And if you did, please have that open, because when we get to the financial part of this presentation, after JP talks about essays, we're going to be talking about SAIs and different things, and it'll be super powerful because we're going to be teaching you, and you can go and look at your specific situation as I'm talking through what these things are. So if you've done it, please open it and have it going. And if you want to pop in and quickly do it, although I would discourage that right now because JP is going to jump on here with some powerful stuff, but there's the link, click on it, you click get started for free and you'll be good to go. You can put up
Yeah, because we've already got a ton of questions around which colleges consider home equity. Are the CSS schools different with the SAI? Are we gonna have the sibling discount or not? Guys, all that work is baked into the technology.
Yeah. We're gonna talk about it in a few minutes. It's baked in, and we're gonna show you and we're gonna educate you. So hold tight. All right, JP, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
All right, thank you guys. So as you see here in the quote, I just want to expand on what Yale's former dean of admissions says. In my practice, I have seen students who had solid academics and amazing extracurriculars, but they did such a poor job with their essays that the student didn't get admitted. Whereas I've seen students who have decent academics, but relatively boring extracurriculars. However, when they got to me, I helped that student write what I call a compelling essay that just it was intended to wow the reader. And more often than not, those students ended up getting accepted into their top choice schools. So for me, the essay is really, really important here. So Peg, if you can move that. Okay, so from my experience, again, the essay it's a critical piece of a successful college application. Even if you're going to apply to a college that you think, hey, they admit everyone. I'm going to tell you a little story. So I have a friend in admissions who does work at a school where they're known for admitting a very high percent of their applicants. But even so, he's told me that there are times when he's reading an application and the grades are solid, the extracurricular activities look good, but in the essay it's just clear that the student is not interested in the school. That maybe they applied because their parents are telling them, oh, you've got to apply there. When he sees those types of applications with those very uninterested essays, he has no problem stamping it rejected. So it is very important to put together a solid essay. And then another reason is you need to understand that the decision to admit your child into any particular school is going to rest on three basic factors: your child's academics, your child's extracurriculars, and then third is their personal insight. And when your child is filling out that college application, the analogy I always like to use is when they're filling out the application and they're answering like, what are your classes? What are your grades? What activities did you do? What achievements and honors did you receive, et cetera, et cetera. Think of those as like random points, dots on a piece of paper. It's that essay that's going to connect those dots and tell the story and create a picture of who that student is. It's the essay's job to tie all of those dots together and make the application feel whole. And then as far as when it comes to writing the essay, I'm going to tell you, write it in your real voice. When it comes to, nowadays what's really popular is AI. And I'll tell you, if you try to use AI like Bard or Chat GPT, those tools, they fall short when it comes down to it. I've seen the essays that they generate and they just feel empty. There's no personality in them. So I recommend don't rely on AI suggestions to make that admissions officer go, wow. When possible, I definitely recommend demonstrating that you've researched the college, its programs, and its values. And it's important to highlight how you would be a good fit there. I'll share another quick story. I had a student, she was actually the daughter of one of my MMA coaches. And he reached out to me, when she was a senior in high school, and he's like, can you help her? And there was, she was a unique person. She wanted to potentially go into psychology because for her, she wanted to study the criminal mind, which made me a little scared. I didn't want to, sleep, let her know where I lived and sleep at night. But she wanted to study the criminal mind, like why do people do the things they do? Ironically, I've a nearby school about 2 hours away. They have an institute that studies that very thing. So we customize her essays to reflect what do they study, what are the research are they producing, and she wrote essays that were custom tailored to that school, and it worked. She got admitted into that school even though her academics were admittedly just a little below average. She really didn't have much to do with her extracurriculars, but she wrote such a customized essays that fed into what the school's values are, that it worked like a charm. Also, another tip is when it's time to write your essays, just this is maybe good practice in general, but you write your first draft, then let it sit. Let it sit for a day or two. Then come back and you can look at it with a refreshed mind. Ask a close friend to read it and see if they feel that the essay captures who you are. You can ask your parents. The parents I find have their own like, oh, my child is so special, I want them to talk about this. I find a friend is maybe a better resource. Also, I personally don't like suggesting the English teacher. English teachers are great, they're wonderful, But I find that English teachers tend to focus too much on proper sentence structure and the grammar usage and all that. And the personality tends to come out, it tends to be lost. So I say, write it as in your voice, have a close friend read it and say, yeah, this sounds like you. This is who you are. Um, as far as what not to do, now I've already mentioned, don't rely on AI programs to write the essay. Don't stretch the truth to where it becomes a lie. Now, obviously, don't wait until the last minute. Writing a good essay takes longer than what most students estimate. Now, depending on how many essays they're writing, I have students that take as long as 12 weeks from start to finish. Um, Maybe it's going to be 8 weeks. It just depends on how many essays they're going to write. And obviously, proofread it and make sure you don't have any grammatical spelling errors. Go ahead and move on. And then go ahead and move forward again. Thanks, Peg. All right, so I'm going to talk about the Common App, and I also want to talk about the UC essays. Uh, there's a little over 1,000 colleges who have streamlined their application process, and they've done so by agreeing to use this, what we call a common application. So I'm going to definitely address their essay prompts, but also—
And guys, I'm just going to tell everybody, you got a lot of great questions in there. When JP's done, Matt and I are going to ignore those, obviously, and we'll let JP go to the races on those when we're presenting.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. Yeah, it's gonna be hard for me to answer those while I'm talking, but I'll hit them up after. So besides the Common App, what you want to do is, I also like to look at the University of California school system, mainly because that's one of the largest school systems that doesn't use the Common App. So I want to kind of do a compare and contrast for you. So can we go look at next the Common App? So you can read through these if you want, but these are the 7 essay prompts from the Common App. And what you're going to find is, what they're trying to ask is basically, get a little deeper dive into who the student is as a person. So, for example, the first one, tell us about your background. You want to talk about what is it that makes you different from your peers? Why are you special? And think of it as you're writing to someone like me who would pretend I'm an admissions officer. Why do I want to admit you when I'm done reading it? What experiences do you have that have shaped you, shaped your character, your ambitions? What just makes you special? So, or look at number 6. This is a big one that I have a friend over at Stanford that number 6 is a huge one. Show your intellectual curiosity. What floats your boat? Do you have an appetite for knowledge about something specific? Why do you love it? And then what have you done to learn more or gain experience about this passion? For example, do you seek out a mentor or do you do some type of self-discovery project? What is your process for learning? And now let's just compare that to the next slide here, the UC apps, the questions. Now, for UCs, they have 8 prompts that you can potentially answer, that you have to select 4 of them. And what you're going to notice is that there's a lot of similarity between the two. For example, number 6 here, it's the same intellectual curiosity question as the Common App. Look at number 5 on the UC one. It overlaps with the second and third prompts of the Common App. My point is if you're applying to both, let's say both UC and a Common App school, I recommend being strategic in your essay selection so that you're not having to rewrite everything from scratch. What I found is with some modifications, you might be able to use the same basic essay and then just apply it towards the Common App or apply it towards the UC app. And the other tip I'm going to give you is if you're applying to both kinds of schools, I highly recommend and encourage my students to write the UC essays first because they're only 350 words. They can choose 4 of them. And if you get that 350 word essay polished, it is so much easier to expand that into a 650 word essay for the Common App. Whereas if you start with the Common App and you create an essay that's 650 words, it's extremely difficult to pare that down to only 350 words to make it still feel good and cohesive. So I find it's much easier to focus on the smaller essays and then expand them into the big essay. And then what I want to share with you is I'm going to peel back the curtain of one of my former students. This is a sample essay that she wrote. This was her first draft. I'll let you guys read it, but I loved the intro. You know, I told her this was a great intro. It's unique. It makes me want to go, I want to read more. But admittedly, as I read on, it kind of fell flat for me. I wasn't quite as impressed. I wasn't, you know, putting myself in admissions shoes. I wasn't wowed, if you will. But you know, strong start, kind of just, you know, fell flat on the finish. So after, you know, going through and looking at her activities and her honors and all that stuff, and I chatted with her, I made some suggestions. I suggested we shift the story a bit. So what I want to show you is next is her third draft, and which ended up being her final draft. If you can share that, it's a little long, but it's you'll see the beginning is basically same, but then what we do is she starts talking about how she's the first girl ever to become a Boy Scout. That's impressive. But more impressively is that she worked her way to become Eagle rank. And she gives specifics, numbers like, you know, 4% of Boy Scouts earn their way to Eagle rank. And so it just makes her even more special that she did it as a girl. She talks about the various leadership skills she's developed and the roles she took on. It demonstrates her leadership and commitment. These are traits that colleges want to see. This is a much better essay for purposes of wowing an admissions officer. And then the other two or three that she wrote paired well with this. There was a consistent theme, if you will, to who she was and her personality. She shared different stories and different things in her life, but it just all highlighted just how unique and special she was. And it worked for her because at the end she got admitted to her top 5 schools that she was really interested in. Okay, let's look at the next one here. Is just going to be, you know, going back to Common App for a minute. The personal essay, you know, think of it as for the most part, all the schools that are using the Common App will have a 650 word, you know, limit for a personal statement, an intro. And when you write that, all the schools are going to see that. So when you write that, you have to be careful. You might not be able to customize it too much for any one school over another. But if you see that you have a bunch of schools and they have, what I always tell students is look up their mission statement, look up on their website, kind of see what are their values. And if they're all similar or similar enough, you know, highlight that theme in your personal statement. But then depending on the school, they might ask for supplemental essays. They might want to ask you for something specific. And then when you write a supplemental essay, that's when you can really customize it for that school. Now, those supplemental essays can vary widely from one school to the next. And I'm just going to give you an example. The school that's probably the most notorious for just asking weird, wacky essays is the University of Chicago. And being a Midwest boy, originally born and raised, I love Chicago. I love the University of Chicago, so I've always paid attention to it. But so I'm just going to share with you one of the essay prompts that they provided their applicants. It goes off saying, Elvis is alive. Okay, maybe not, but here in the Office of College Admissions, we are persuaded that current Elvis sightings in highway rest areas, grocery stores, and laundromats are part of a wider conspiracy involving 5 of the following: the metric system, the Mall of America, the crash of the Hindenburg, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, Lint, J.D. Salinger, and wax fruit. Help us get to the bottom of this evil plot by constructing your own theory of how and why 5 of these items and events are related. Your narrative may take any form you like, but try to keep your theory to under 2 pages. Okay, like that's a wild and fun essay to write, but this is just, the University of Chicago is known for this every year. They come up with this crazy stuff, and they just want to see how creative their student can be. So this is your chance to really shine for a school when they do provide you any sort of supplemental essay options. And let's actually go to the next slide and talk about that. The thing you should keep in mind is that if the school is selective, or the more selective the school, the more likely they're going to ask for supplemental essays. They might say they're optional, but they're not. What I always like to say is, yeah, if you think they're optional, so is admitting your child. That's optional. So you want to fill out every possible essay they offer you. Also, compared to just even 5 years ago, students are being asked to write more essays than ever before, especially when we've gotten to test optional in these last few years. Historically, submitting test scores were a big component of an application, and for many schools they still are. You got your GPA, the courses you took, and the rigor you took. You had your test scores, you had your activities, your achievements, and then obviously the essay. In this world of test optional, you take away, if you don't submit it, you take away one of those main components. That just put more stress on really the essay to help win that college admissions person over. So it's use this chance to help your child stand out, make them again just be different from the rest of the crowd, and say, I belong at your school, I will excel at your school, I will make great contributions to your school, I am phenomenal. This, brag. Let's move on. And the last thing I want to say is, here's a list of schools that I've already mentioned that University of California doesn't use the Common App. Here's a list of other schools that also don't. They have their own separate essays. Now, before I turn it over back to Matt and Peg, and they're going to talk about financial aid and all that. Remember that in order to have a meaningful conversation about cutting cost of college, and that's very important, but you have to do it in the context of being able to get admitted into college. So as I've said before, it's the essay's job to make the application feel complete, feel special, and leave the admissions officer saying, yes, we want to admit our child, admit this child to our school. That's what the essay can really do for you. With that, I'm going to turn it over back to Matt and Peg, and I'll go through and start answering these questions that I see in the box.
All right. Thanks, JP. I will just share real 30-second with my daughter. She was applying to social work programs, and she was a decent student. Nowadays, average SATs, right? But her essay talked about her interaction on one of her mission trips, having a conversation and getting to know a homeless guy on the street. And she told a story, and she got in everywhere. And I really think it's because, as JP was saying, it grabbed people. They were in the story, and it tied into all the things she's done in high school and what she wants to study. So it really looked like she was a kid who knew what she wanted and has been out there doing it. So for what it's worth. All right, now let's jump into financial aid. So I'm going to take a couple minutes to just talk about how financial aid works. The big takeaway here is all these colleges are discounting their cost of attendance, which is tuition and fees, room and board, books, and travel and personal expenses. So this has been going up for decades, as we all know. But if you know what you're doing, you can find schools for your family with your finances and your child's academic profile where you can get discounts. And colleges are doing this in three different ways. I was going to say one of three ways, but that's not right. It could be all of these, honestly. So the first bucket is need-based grants. So as the name kind of hints to, you have to have need-based aid eligibility, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, to get the need-based grants. These are endowment money from the different colleges. It can also be a federal grant or a state grant. But the lion's share of the money will come from college endowments for most families. The second bucket is merit-based scholarships. So this is the flip side. This is based on your child, grades, test scores, talents. It's given out by Office of Admissions. They could care less about your ability to pay most of the time. Bill Gates's kids can get merit-based scholarships. So honestly, for some families that are on here, I bet, and the families that we've worked with, Matt and I, thousands of them, I'd say 50% of mine through the years, they don't have need-based eligibility, but they still can't afford to pay $90,000 times 4 years times 2 kids. So keep that in mind. The last bucket we call self-help. So this is loans and work study. Not a bad thing, as long as the loans are within a reasonable amount. And it's a part of a lot of funding strategies, but obviously it's not the free money, right? So those are the three buckets. So how do you know as a family if you're eligible? There's this thing called the Student Aid Index. Used to be called the Expected Family Contribution, EFC. So if you have older kids, think of it as the same. There's changes in the back back-end calculation, but SAI has replaced the EFC language, okay? If you have your MyCap account sitting there, go look at it. You can see your SAIs. This is the minimum amount the colleges think you can afford to pay for a year of school. Most parents are shocked at how high this number is. Sometimes there's strategies to lower it. Sometimes it is what it is, more often than not. So cost of attendance minus this SAI, that says your eligibility. So if a school costs 70 and you have an SAI of 100,000, if you do the math, you don't have need. Doesn't mean you're paying 100,000. They're not going to give you those need-based grants. If the school costs 70 and you have an SAI of 50, you get where I'm going. Now you have $20,000 of need. Doesn't mean the college is going to swoop in and give you that. They all have different financial aid policies on how they award students. And we're going to talk about that. So that's how it works. So this SAI, how is it calculated? Basically, there's two main parts. There's assets and there's income. The student assets and income and the parent. So as far as the assets, it's only non-retirement assets. So 401k, 403b, IRAs, including Roth IRAs, because I get that question a lot. Those are all retirement accounts. So if you've saved really well, awesome. Those are not going to be part of the calculation. Everything else is. So that means stocks, bonds, CDs, checking and savings, all of that is in there, and 529s are in there. So I'm going to answer this question that I know we'll get. If you have a 529 and you're the parent that owns it, which is typically how it's done within the family, and then your child's the beneficiary, the student's beneficiary, that's an asset of yours, because I won't get into the IRS reasons, but it is still your asset. It's not gifting, okay? So that's an asset of yours, which is actually a good thing, because parental assets are assessed at a much lower rate than student assets. So that's a big mistake. And I understand why parents make it, because logically you'd think it was your child's asset, but it is not. If you have UGMAs or UTMAs, if that doesn't ring a bell, don't stress about it. Those are your child's asset, and there are strategies, but it depends on your family if you should even go down that road. So that's something you should get some support on before you do anything. If grandma and grandpa own a 529, very common, that is not disclosed on the financial aid forms. It's only the people that are submitting the FAFSA, okay?
Hey, sorry if you hit on this, but can you talk about if you have multiple kids?
Oh, yeah, I did it. Thank you, Carp. Yeah, new rule this year with the 529s, you're only going to disclose the balance in the student's 529, your child that you're doing the forms for. If you've got big balances for two younger kids, you don't disclose that. It's only for that student. And that's a great thing for families. It used to be you had to put the whole bucket in, so you don't anymore. So thanks for that nudge on that one, Matt. Last thing is real estate. So the FAFSA, and we're going to talk about these two forms in a minute, but the FAFSA looks at any real estate outside the primary home you live in. So wherever you live, that's off the table. But anything else, if you've got a condo in Florida, I had a mom yesterday who had that, anything that's not your primary home, that equity, which is a market value minus any liens, a mortgage, a home equity line of credit, that's what your equity is. That's going to be part of your assets, and the college is going to look at it. So you want to make sure you're not overvaluing any real estate asset, even your primary home, which the CSS profile will ask about. So you really want the lowest defensible, honest market value. And then, as our slide says, you can do about 80% of that, because as we all know who have sold property and real estate, you don't walk away with all of that. So that's just high level how you're going to want to think about your real estate. Over here, we talk about debt. The point of that bullet is you should always be disclosing if you have student loans, all that kind of stuff. You can feel free to reach out to the college. They're not going to ask about it on the form, but this is where Matt's going to touch on this briefly right at the end. There's a thing called appealing, and that's where you're going to share. We're going to do a whole webinar on that, but just realize, because people will always write in, well, I have this, well, I have that. It doesn't ask you that, doesn't mean you can't share down the road, for sure. Okay, income. Let's touch on this. Income.
Sorry, getting another repeat question here, and apologies if you hit it and I was too busy banging away on the keyboard here. Can you talk about the timing of is there a look back period, right?
Yeah.
Or certain interesting strategies? Is it too late for me?
Yeah, so and I usually tee up this one and say, so assets are literally, if you want to be this meticulous, when you hit submit on the form. So you have time to talk to us, get some help if you have UGMAs and UGMAs. Should I do something with them? You have time. Income, not so much, right? That's a prior year look back. So as you see on the slide here, you've got a senior right now. When these forms go live soon, it's all going to be about the 2022 tax year. So that's said and done. Doesn't mean you're not going to appeal if there's some anomalies in that year or your situation is different, but it is what it is, right? That's going to roll onto your forms. And then if you need to reach out, you reach out. Whereas assets, you still have time to do some planning before you submit your forms. So the income, the biggest driver here is your adjusted gross income. There are some other pieces to it, but that's the biggest driver. And for students, both parents and students have an income, they call an income protection allowance. But for the parents, it's, you take any allowance you can get, right? But it's not going to have your, it's not going to lower it by 50%. But for students, as you can see on the slide, for federal, not for the institutional schools that we'll talk about in a minute, it's gone up and up, and now it's over $9,400. So what that means is if my child worked all through the school year at a dojo, he was into karate, so he had decent income. But if it's under 9,400 for that tax year, it's a wash. So that's really nice. It doesn't come in and affect it, because student income is assessed at 50% after allowances. So that can move the needle, but most kids aren't, they're not making 20 grand a year, right? Unless they're in a co-op program and they're college students already. So that's how the income works. It's a 2-year look back. All right, I'm going to turn this back over to you, Matt, and you can talk about that second bucket that I brought up for discounts.
Yeah, so merit-based aid, right? I mean, like Peg said, there's going to just be a percentage of you that are not going to be eligible for need-based financial aid. There's no magic wand that we or anybody can wave to make that happen, but you're probably not ready, or you don't want to start paying $90,000 a year for college, right? So where are we going to get our meaningful discounts? And merit-based aid is usually the biggest bucket that we do this, right? So this is money that's given from the admissions office, really because they have an incentive. They want to create a financial incentive to get your kid on campus. And you can probably go to the next slide, Peggy. So just a couple of notes here before we dive in and actually look at some specific examples. And I've got a lot of questions around the platform and, again, CSS schools and our SAI. We're going to tie that all together in just a couple of minutes here, but a couple of specifics in terms of merit aid. Number one, we want to find out, well, who's going to give my kid a scholarship that's also going to be a good fit for my kid? We're going to talk about that. Another thing that I want to flag here is that a lot of families that either assume or maybe know they're not going to be eligible for need-based financial aid, they dismiss doing the FAFSA, doing the CSS profile, doing any financial aid applications, where for some colleges, they may require those or one of them in order to be considered for merit-based aid. So we want to be crystal clear. Are any of the schools that we're applying to, where we're hoping to get scholarships, do they require those forms at these schools? And almost in the same breath here, you see what I've highlighted, what we've highlighted, the Ivy Leagues or the NESCACs. The NESCACs are little private schools up here in the Northeast, the Williams and Amhersts of the world. Scholarships don't exist there, right? There's now about 100 schools in the country where scholarships do not exist. There's not one kid walking around Harvard or MIT that is there on a scholarship. It doesn't matter. And obviously, these are all wildly brilliant, talented, well-rounded kids. Not one kid on campus is there on a scholarship. So as we're finalizing our list of schools, especially if we have a really talented kid, but we're also starting to worried about our price point and thinking we're not eligible for too much need-based financial aid, I got to know, do scholarships even exist at the schools that we're targeting, right? That's really important here. And Peg already teased it a little bit. I'll kind of hammer it again quickly at the end. But we talk about this appeal process, right? Which essentially means once I get an offer from a college, financial scholarship offer, can I go back and do better than that initial offer? And the short answer oftentimes, or plenty of times, is yes, right? Of course, not always. But number one, it's important to know that mindset, right? I kind of this mindset of like, I don't want to accept this first offer, just like any other of the major investments I've made in my life, right? When I go to buy a home, car, whatever. But what we can do with that now, right? For you class 2024 families, obviously we're a few months away from this part of the process. But by applying to competing colleges, right? At the end of the day, these are businesses, guys, right? I mean, they're nonprofit institutions here, but there's a business element to this transaction, for lack of a better word. And just like most things in business, we want to create leverage. We want to have negotiating power. So if I know I went to a little college in the Boston area here called Stonehill College, right? If I work with a family and they really want to go to this school, I'm going to make them apply to Bentley. I'm going to make them apply to Providence College, right? Because these are competitors with one another. And even if they hated Providence or they knew they didn't want to go to Bentley, I'll make them apply to one of those just so we can use those offers as leverage when we go back to Stonehill. So again, I know, I think for a lot of folks that are going through this for the first time, that's not necessarily front of brain. It's not necessarily common knowledge. So we at least want to plant that seed now. And Peg, what I can do is I can share my screen quickly here. So let's kind of let's bring this together here, right? Let's look at, okay, need-based financial aid, merit-based financial aid, and talk about a few things here. So I see most of you have already created your MyCap account, and if you want to share that link again, Peg, for those of you that haven't, a couple things to look at. So this ever elusive SAI, right? Or basically the dollar amount that determines the foundation for your family's need-based financial aid eligibility. And there's two kind of broad buckets in terms of how colleges come up with this number. Most colleges, and just about all federal and public schools, not all, but the vast majority use this federal SAI, right? This is schools that only use the FAFSA, and they're only using this federal formula. Okay, whereas a lot of these private institutions, again, not all of them, but a lot of them use something called the institutional methodology. And we see that there's a range here, right? And for this family, there's a huge range, right? Their federal SAI is call it $20,000. Their institutional SAI is anywhere between, $17,000 and $40,000. Why is that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, this family, they own their home. They have a mortgage on their primary residence, but they have a meaningful amount of equity. Most institutional methodology colleges look at home equity to some extent, not all, and we'll talk about that, but most of them look at it to some extent. Another huge difference between the federal and institutional schools, federal schools that only look at, if you're a divorced or separated family, so if you're a 2-household family, they're only looking at one household. They're only looking at the income and assets of the parent or parents that complete the FAFSA. And that's it, right? It's as if the other household doesn't exist, okay, for financial aid purposes. Completely different from most schools that use the institutional methodology. Most of those schools are going to look at both households, okay? So obviously lots to talk about there, and we won't have time to go into too much detail on all the FAFSA changes, but one of the headlines this year is for divorced and separated families. If you fit in that bucket somewhere, you're going to want to talk to us beyond today. I promise you that. But what I want you focused on, I told you more than you need to know there. I want you focused on, what are these schools actually going to cost you? Or are you going to pay the full sticker price, like a state school, like University of Maryland, right? This is a Boston area family. Or are you going to pay just a fraction of the sticker price based on your SAI and based on how generous they are with need-based financial aid? Let the platform do the work for you guys, okay? And let's just look at one example. I'm going to pick one or two here, depending on time. Throw out a college that you guys are talking about at home. What are some of the top choices? What's the dream school, or where are you going to apply ED, or just throw out a couple of schools that you're thinking about. Let's look at the Bentley Falcons, our old football rivals there. Okay. So look at Bentley. If we drill down into Bentley or any school, right, we can see that, okay, we're going to get some type of discount, right? So ultimately this school is going to be under $50,000 for us. Still a huge number, but it's not the $80,000 sticker price. We're showing eligibility for need-based financial aid and scholarships, but it's rare that we'll get both. It's rare that colleges will what's called stack need-based and merit-based financial aid. So we're going to get the higher of those two numbers here that's going to drive us down to our net cost. So again, you guys should be finding out. We're going to be the source of truth for you here. What these schools are actually going to cost you. We have every scholarship at every school in the country. We're going to tell you how much, if any, we think your student is likely to get. So obviously, I know I'm moving pretty quickly here, but I want you to understand what you have access to and where you should be focused at this time, which is basically, what are these schools actually going to cost my family? And last thing I'll show you briefly here, this advanced school search allows you to say, okay, what are some admissions criteria that's important, right? Maybe you know your kid wants to be close to home. They prefer small schools. They're thinking about major in bio or whatever. You can put any number of filters there. But now we can just go say, well, go show me that, but I want to know who's going to give me scholarships at those types of schools, right? Maybe we weren't thinking about Wheaton College, but if they're going to give me 40 grand, that's interesting. Let's take a look. If we are eligible for financial aid, you can just sort based on that, right? So it's really hard to get into MIT, but here's some other schools that are really good with financial aid. So anyways, I just want to make sure that you guys all understand what you have access to as you're kind of rounding out the list here.
Okay, let me hop in here again. All right. I will say when you're using that advanced search, you really are shopping for college with affordability in mind, which is what we're all about here. So now let's talk about the nitty-gritty of how you actually are applying for financial aid and these forms that are out there. So I'm going to whip through this pretty fast. There's two different forms. I'm going to hit both of them. Of course, deadlines matter across the board in this process. So you want to keep that in mind. And it's a responsibility, obviously, of the families to keep on top of that, not the colleges. They might remind you, but it's not really their job, right? So the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, is the main form that almost every school in the country is going to require. I'll talk about a second one in a minute. Even the schools that require the second form, you still have to submit the FAFSA. It's not in lieu of the FAFSA. So big thing here, if I have any parents here that are familiar with this, have older kids, usually the FAFSA goes live October 1. This year, there's been some changes that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And the Department of Ed, the government, they're getting this all dialed in. So for a 1-year deal, it's going to be late. And what the Department of Ed is saying right now is it's going to be sometime in December. We don't know when. When we know, we will be shooting it out to our whole community immediately. So we don't know. Sometime in December. As I said, it's the prior year. So if you have a current senior, it's going to be all about 2022. If you have a junior, it's going to be about 23, and you're still in 23. So think about that, right? Don't create a capital gain or create income that you don't need to, that then you have to go back to the college and go through it with them after the fact. So just keep that in mind for younger parents. Matt touched on this when he was doing in the software teaching, but only the custodial parent submits this form with the student for a divorced separated family. And the definition of a custodial parent is the parent that provides the most financial support. So this is a planning opportunity because they left it. There's a gray area there, right? The families will say to me, well, Peg, we're 50-50. Great. One parent, the parent that it's more advantageous to submit this form to get the most financial aid, have them spend $100 more, and you're following the rules, you're being honest, you're good to go. And even families that aren't 50-50 on paper, if you can sit down and look at, just because you're receiving child support doesn't mean that other parent provides the most support. You want to get into the weeds on this. If you're not a numbers person, we can help you with this, right? You want to think about, my child spends 85% of the time with me, and I have a mortgage, and I pay utilities, and I pay for soccer, whatever it is, even though you're receiving child support. Do a spreadsheet and really see if you can do some planning and spend more money intentionally, or maybe it's already the case that you provide more financial support. So just keep that in mind. The one thing you can do right now for the FAFSA, you can go get what's called your Federal Student Aid ID. So the student needs it. So they're going to do it. The website's here. You're going to give your date of birth and your social security number, make up some security questions. And the government is just basically making sure you are who you are, because you're going to use this to log into the FAFSA as well as submitting it electronically. And then the parents, I recommend, if you're married, I recommend both parents getting an FSA ID. There's some major changes to how this is going to work this year. We will do a line by line with you soon on these forms, and we will go through it. I don't want to get into it now. Your eyes are going to gloss over. You don't have any context. But the one thing you can do is go get that FSA ID for both parents and the student. And at least you'll have that done, because it takes a few days for them to process it. So, okay. CSS profile. This is the second form that I alluded to. So about 200 schools, they're mostly private, but you got UNC, Chapel Hill, and Michigan, and UVA, and William and Mary. I think that's all of them. That are state schools that also require it. We have this all built into our software, so we tell you what you need, what you need to be submitting. This form is a lot longer, and it's going to be even longer this year because the FAFSA is getting shorter. And they pretty much try to unturn every stone of your finances. So just keep that in mind. Home equity in your primary home that I said earlier is not part of the FAFSA. Your other real estate is, but not the home you live in. That is on the table here. And Matt touched on this in the software. We know that, and we know it would be easy if all the schools said, we look at it and this is how we look at it. Unfortunately, that's not what they do. They're all over the place in how they look at it. And we've dialed into that and built it in. This can be a game changer. One of the founders of CAP, Billy Rabbit, he was sharing the other day, he lives in Jersey. Hey, Jersey, I'm a Jersey girl. Anyways, a family, $85,000 in income, but they're sitting on a house that they own free and clear for $2 million. That moves the needle if there's a school that won't look at that, right? So these things, they're very important to understand the different planning opportunities. As I was just talking about, if you're divorced or separated, there's a lot of nuances here, and the CSS profile grabs both sets of information. It's not together, so privacy is maintained. There's the custodial parent sends it in with the student. That's the CSS profile. Then there's something called a non-custodial CSS profile. The other parent will submit it. It gets to College Board, which is the nonprofit that your child almost certainly has a login, AP, PSAT, SAT. So they've been involved with College Board. Both of those go to College Board. The colleges get this information, and they do some proprietary number crunching to come up with their own SAI. It's not nearly as transparent, and the same across colleges as what we call FM, the Federal Methodology SAI. If you are a business owner, the value of your business on the FAFSA and the CSS, and Matt will talk about this in a minute, it's included. And I'll let Matt touch on it. I won't get into your value may be zero, it may not. So he'll touch on that. But if you're a business owner, there's a lot. They ask for your tax returns, and they do that so they can go through and see all of your schedules. And they say, oh, there's depreciation, we might throw that out. So it's very important as a business owner that I recommend you work with us so that we understand those nuances and we know how to appeal around some of that stuff when we're looking at award letters. So that's the CSS profile. I will just say very quickly, we strongly recommend that every family submits the FAFSA. One of the main reasons is because there are some schools that want it for merit aid. That's the non-need-based aid. So that probably doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, but it is what it is. So unless you're going to research that, you don't want to leave money on the table. The other reason with these forms is there's some schools that if you don't apply for financial aid the first year, they will not consider you for aid. And what if something happens? Look what happened with COVID. Business owners had to shut their doors. If you reach out and say, hey, I want you to reevaluate my family, sorry, you didn't apply. Not all schools, but there are, and I've helped families and tried to push it, and they haven't budged. So just be very careful before you make the decision not to submit these forms. All right, I'll turn it back over to you, Matt.
Yeah, quickly, we might go a couple of minutes past here, guys, which is okay on as far as we're concerned. JP, you duck out if you need to, man. But hopefully you guys can stick around a couple minutes later for us. I want to make sure that we get to everything. There's some lingering questions. But quickly, Peg, if you remember something else that Billy Rabbit taught us, specifically as it pertains to the FAFSA and CSS profile, you remember?
Yes, it's It's a glass of wine. I'm not a wine drinker. I would be beer for me, but a glass of wine for the FAFSA, bottle of wine for the CSS. And of course, we're kidding. We're not encouraging excessive drinking, but you get our point. Like if you do the CSS first, you will be loving the FAFSA, and you will be this year because it's coming out later. So
CSS is a beast, right? I mean, I know you guys are hearing all sorts of things. I hear these forms are impossible for some people they are, right? And it's their worst nightmare. For other people that it's no big deal. But I think in my opinion, the FAFSA, and we'll see this year's, right? But in theory, fairly user-friendly. I don't think too overwhelming. The CSS profile earns its reputation, and it is a beast, and it is a pain, and hundreds of questions and all this, very invasive. So what are the headlines before we kind of get to closing and kind of next steps and takeaways and what happens from here? Because obviously we've covered a ton, we've gone pretty fast, and all of this stuff is pretty much mission critical, not a lot of fluff today. But here's the headlines for the FAFSA changes. Number one, again, sibling discount is going away, at least at the federal SAI schools. I think predominantly for IM schools, it's going to remain there, but it remains to be seen. And there's still plenty of colleges that have yet to make up their mind. Okay. Business owners, please, if you guys are a business owner, I don't care the nature of your business, big, small, sole proprietor, talk to us. Talk to us before you hit send on that FAFSA and CSS profile. And I would say the same thing if you are a divorced or separated family, 2-household family, you have to talk to us. These are where the two biggest mistakes are going to be made this year that we have some control over. How we value our business, we can help you with, and it matters. Who completes the FAFSA for 2-household families? We have some control over this, and it matters. Okay, so please talk to us, and I'll tell you what that looks like in a second here. Before you hit send on those forms, anybody, I would venture a guess that anybody is going to get meaningful value, but especially if you fit into those buckets. Okay, now there's some wins for the FAFSA. This changes this year. The biggest one being we got more help for the folks that need it the most. So I don't want to bury the lead here because I think we can all get behind that. We're all psyched about that. But it's these other families that are being negatively impacted that are essentially funding this program, right? It's not coming out of the pockets of the colleges or the Department of Education or anything like that. It's these business owners, 2-household families, and those that have siblings in college at once. And then last slide here, again, you've heard us kind of sprinkle this in throughout, right, is this fact that we can appeal for more money, right? So Peg, if you just want to quickly show this last one, we do entire presentations focused on this. We're not going to do it tonight, but the takeaway is the seed we're planting is do not accept that first offer. And there are some things that we can do now to put ourselves in a good position to successfully appeal when it comes time to do that. Again, for early applicants right around the holidays, and for regular applicants closer to middle of March and beginning of April. But again, I think it's important just to know that that's a thing. So last thing that I want to show you here as we also finish out kind of closing questions. Our big get, right? Our job as presenters always, if we say what's our one job as presenters, it's to get you guys to do something. It's to keep you engaged in some capacity. Okay. And we always like to reward our live audience. So we have a today only deal. Okay. We have a today only offer. And I'm going to talk about a couple of them. Part of it is going to be on the essay front. Part of it's going to be on the financial front. So these are the 3 ways that you can interface with us. Okay. If you want to upgrade to that full version of the software that we showed you, that means you can put unlimited schools in there. You can use that advanced search to sort based on scholarships or financial aid, right? You can just go upgrade. And I know Peg's going to put this link in the chat if she hasn't already. Use coupon code September 20 that expires at midnight tonight. So coupon code SEP20 will expire I think I might even be showing the wrong one because I know this one expires. So disregard that 7 days here because this one expires tonight at midnight. That it'll get you that full version of the platform for $119 if you're just that total DIYer. Okay. If you're someone that says, I'm all over this, I'm a DIYer, but I want someone to look over my shoulder a little bit, use the premium plus the expert, because what that gets you is access to the full version of the software for a year. But then you can get an hour with any one of our experts, right? You want to meet with JP, right? You're thinking about the University of Southern California or one of those types of colleges, tap into his brain. Okay. You want to meet with Peg or myself or anybody else on our team and go look at our team of experts. I think it's a pretty great roster. Do that. And you can use that hour anywhere, at any time in the next 365 days. So if you think you might have a question, right, at some point over that you would want to meet with an expert at some point over the next year, do that. Book it today by midnight. Okay. It's only the live audience that's going to get this. And then lastly, we have our comprehensive, what we call wake me up when it's over services, right? So these are for people that are like, I don't have the time. I don't have the expertise. Obviously the price point is a lot different, but these are for families that basically just want us to take over. Okay. We're going to do your FAFSAs for you. We're going to do your CSS profiles for you. We're going to tell you how and who should complete these forms. We're going to be on the front lines helping you with the appeal part of the process, right? So obviously the price point is completely different, but it's $500 off if you get it today. And we also go up in price October 1st. We have seasonal pricing. So as our roster is getting full, which it is, some of our services are already sold out for this year. Okay. Our comprehensive admission services are gone, but we do have our comprehensive financial aid services. So again, it's a lot of money. We're very good at showing families the ROI. So do something, guys, right? This isn't the place. Nobody likes to think about spending money when we're looking at schools that cost $85,000 and $90,000, but don't I'm sure your kids have been holding up their end of the bargain here. Let's give them every single opportunity to make this process go as smooth and cost effective as possible. So invest in that, right? We're very, very good at what we do. Okay. You're going to see a return on it. For the essays, this is brand new. We're psyched. We're psyched. We worked very hard on this week. Hopefully it came through crystal clear, and JP was telling us right offline before we jumped on today. Number one, again, just kind of reiterated what we've been hearing across the whole ecosystem. Essays have never been more important than this year. Full stop. Okay. And JP also shared, this is the first I've heard of it today, but in his community, the overall kind of consensus seems to be that the quality is down. Know what I heard when he said that? That's an opportunity. That's an opportunity, because if we can get this right, obviously that's a big competitive advantage for this. So tap into the people that do this for a living, guys. It's $100 per essay, right? So and how it's going to work. So you just go to the link, you say, hey, here's how many essays I want. It's just the one from the Common App. I got 14 essays because I got all these supplements. Okay. However many you want, right? You just buy it for $100 per essay. You're going to get an onboarding questionnaire that's going to ask you a few questions. Okay. Then you're going to get to connect with JP just so the student, JP gets to know the student a little bit and vice versa. And then he's going to work his magic, and you get a couple of edits beyond that as a result of that. So again, in the grand scheme of things, nobody wants to think about spending money right now, guys, but these are investments. You are making investments. If you do it on the front end, you're going to get a return on the back end. This is maximizing your odds of improving our chances from an admissions standpoint. And then up here, it's about how do we make this thing affordable? How do we make the money work, right? And that's what we're good at, right? So Peggy, JP, I don't know if you'd layer anything on there, but that's
yeah, I would just reiterate. I'm trying to pull my thing down so I can stop share. Oh, it wasn't me sharing. That's why I couldn't find it. Oh boy, Peg. Just like we said at the beginning, just keep the ball rolling, right? I'm talking parent to parent here. Like if your child is not a senior, you might not feel like it's crunch time, but just start engaging, watch our webinars, access our free resources, and then pick where on this journey that we can support you. Is it, getting into the upgraded platform right now is a great call. If you know you're going to want a meeting at some point, say to review forms or whatever it happens to be, just do the middle bucket. It's $349, right? It's a screaming deal to have that thrown in together, right? Just do it. The meeting doesn't expire, right? So you can book that meeting in 2 months or tomorrow, right? It's there for you to use. And it's even a better deal now because we're giving you this discount. So, but I find most people that want our full service or Wake Me When It's Over, you kind of know who you are, right? You get that this is super important, but you just don't want to deal with it, right? And that's fine. So that's why we're here. So we're here to educate and support you along the way. That's really what we're here to do. But just don't take all this information, put it in a pile on your desk and say, oh God, my life's so busy. I'll come back to this later. Like, stay engaged, because it'll make, when you really have to address this and lists are being built, it'll relieve a lot of stress in the household.
Can I piggyback real quick on that, Peg?
Sure.
So, and just reiterate, I mean, the premium, it's less than $10 a month. That's foolhardy, in my opinion, to not upgrade to the premium. The premium with expert, as Peg said, you can book that meeting anytime down the road or immediately. My calendar's already filled up where I've had families meet with me this week about early in the process. I got meetings booked up later in the season, and they leave a note as to what their question is. Great, I can prepare for it. And it's a ridiculously cheap rate to get that kind of time with an expert. In the private practice world of this, I don't know any of the experts that charge that little. So it is a phenomenal discount and a great way to get some extra help.
Yeah, no, thanks, guys. And again, too, it's a lot easy for us to say. Obviously, it's self-serving. We want you to buy, right? But we're genuine, and that this is the right thing. Nobody comes back to us and says, I didn't get my money's worth, right? It just it doesn't happen. And the thousands of times we've done it, I can count that on less than one hand, right? We're talking about a fraction of a percentage point, and these are big decisions. Should we go early decision? Should we not? What's the school actually going to cost me? Talk to somebody that can give you a clear answer there, right? A lot of people asking about divorces and how their pensions are going to work in, or real estate. Should I sell my home? All these questions, guys, those are high stakes questions. Let's get them right. We're happy to. So, all right, well, that's great. JP, I learned a lot specifically about on the essay front. I typically do. So that was really, really good. And again, too, you guys know how important this is. Don't overthink some of these, guys. Don't overthink these. And let me tell you something about the full service, right? Obviously, that's a different level of investment. Some of you know right away, that's not even the conversation. But if you want, and you can hold me to this as being recorded, book that today, right? Sign up for it today. And if you want a gut check call with somebody tomorrow, myself or somebody on my team tomorrow, to say, hey, let me just talk to somebody one-on-one before I completely go through with this, we're happy to honor that. You just write into support@collegeaidpro.com. You say, I purchased the full service Wake Me Up When It's Over package. Matt said we could get a gut check call. I'd like to take advantage of that. Please do. Totally get it. And if you talk to myself or somebody on my team tomorrow and you're like, you know what, this doesn't feel right, doesn't seem like a good fit, we'll give you 100% refund, and no harm, no foul. So,
and is there a link? Somebody's asking how to sign up for the essay review.
Yeah, so it's in the landing page.
Yeah, you've got the landing page, and I'll pop that in again, and then just scroll down, and it's right there where Matt is right now. And then you can go ahead and do that. So I will put the landing page in again, so it's at the bottom of the chat. And then there's a little bit more information for you too.
Yep, exactly. See some more details in there. Thank you, Peg. Thank you, JP. Thanks for going a little bit overtime here. And thanks for everybody that stuck along, for the whole deal too. Hopefully you learned something and continued. We're excited to continue to support you in whatever manner you choose, whatever that looks like.
Yep, keep the ball rolling, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.